All right, so this session is going to cover Kickstart. All right, so Kickstart is an automation tool. It basically allows you to automate the process of installing or configuring your system. So instead of having to build your system from scratch, you can use a file, which is an anaconda.cfg file, which is a default file that is installed on your system once you build any Red Hat or CentOS system. It comes with that system. So what you do is you take that file, and that file basically contains all of the configurations of your system. So like the network, the partitions, everything that you'll need to be able to build a new system. So you take that file and basically use it to deploy a new system. So that's what we're going to go over today. So this system here, lab 2, actually lab 2, is what this system right here is. The system that you see here, that was what lab 2 is. So this system is a CentOS.7. So remember, CentOS and Red Hat are exactly the same. I just chose to use a CentOS system. And another good thing about using a CentOS system is that your repository is already comes configured. So it uses these um, repositories for installing any packages. So it's not using your local CD. So if I cd etc repos d, you'll see I have a bunch of items here related to CentOS, and I didn't put any of this here. It already came with the install because CentOS is free, and they have their repositories that allows us to be able to connect to and install any packages. All right, so Kickstart. All right, so if you cd to the root home directory, so you need to be root, cd to the root home directory. So if you just do cd and enter, and if you do an ll, you will see this file here, anaconda ks.cfg. If you're using Red Hat, it should be called the same as well, anaconda.cfg or ks.cfg. So this file is default. It comes with the system. Let's go ahead and let's vi this file. All right. All right. So this file basically consists of anything related to this current system that I'm on. So if you see here, I have items related to the keyboard, to the CD-ROM, to the network here. So it's just the network configuration on this particular system, the gateway, the IP address, as well as DNS and subnet mask as well. It also provides the encrypted root password, time zone information, user related information. So you can actually add more users to this line if you would like, and as well as the disk partition. So you see we have our root, boot, and our swap partition. So we're basically going to take this file and we're going to build another system using this exact configuration details. So the only thing that you'll need to change on this file, or there are actually some few things you can change that are optional, but for one thing, we're going to change the IP address. We don't want the same IP address. So our new system is going to have a different IP address. So I'm going to change this .10 to a .11. And if we scroll down a little further, you'll see the packages that are going to be installed. And these are default packages that already came with this system. So these are the packages that are going to be installed on the new system. And you can add more packages to here as well that you would like to have installed. And the final thing that we're going to add at the end of this line is reboot. So basically, on our new system, once this file is executed and it reads through this line, at the end of the install, it's basically going to reboot the new system. All right. So do you have any questions so far?
Yeah, quick question. You said you changed the IP address and what else again?
And at the bottom there, I just put reboot at the
Reboot,
bottom.
and that was it?
Yeah. Yep,
Okay.
and that was it. There's so many other things you can do. You can create, let's say you knew that there were some other users that you knew were going to be added to the new system. So right before the end here, the percentage end, you can actually create some users. So you can even do like a user add T Smith. You can do a user add R Johnson. And let's say if there's some packages that you like installed as well. Don't tell me this thing wants to start acting slow on me. All right. So let's say there were some packages that you want to install. You can do a yum install. Let's say you knew this system was going to be this new system was going to be your DNS server. You can do a yum install bind -y, or you can even do a yum install NFS -y, and it will install these packages and add these users as well. All right, so I'm just gonna remove these, but you can have those added as well, and it will basically install those packages as well as add those users as well. Right. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save this file. And the next thing I want to do is I'm going to install HTTPD. Basically, this file, the anaconda.cfg file, we're actually going to host it on a web server. We're going to host this file on a web server so that our new system will be able to retrieve it. So that's the only way our new system will be able to retrieve this file from this system. So in order for us to do that, we want to install HTTPD. So that'll be a yum install HTTPD -y. All right, so let's go ahead and install HTTPD. And remember, once HTTPD is installed, you now have access to var dub HTML. So now what we're going to do is we're going to copy, or actually what I'm going to do is inside of this file, I'm going to create a file. I'm going to create a file, I'm going to call it ks.cfg. That's what I'm going to create. So ks.cfg. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the contents inside of the Anaconda file into this file. So I'm going to copy the content that was inside the Anaconda file. So this Anaconda file, I'm going to copy it to the ks.cfg. All right, so I'm going to cat ks.cfg, and you'll see that my new content is now copied over. So now what we want to do is we want to restart HTTPD. So we're going to do a systemctl restart HTTPD. Now let's check the status as well, just to make sure that it is started. So you have the green light and it's showing that it's active. So now, once all of that is complete, you actually want to check on your browser, on your web browser, either Google or Internet Explorer, to make sure that you're able to see the content inside of that ks.cfg file. So you remember once we when we did the Apache installation and we created that index.html file. So this is basically like the same concept. So let's go over to our web browser. So I'm going to do a 192.168.1.10. That's the IP address of this system here. It's the IP address of this system. And then I'm going to do a /ks.cfg. And the reason why I did a 192.168.1.10 because that IP address is the same thing as your document root. So var dub HTML, that's your document root. So var dub HTML is basically the same as your IP address, 192.168.1.10. So, and what's inside of the HTML? What we have inside of the HTML is our ks.cfg file, ks.cfg. So now let's go back to our browser. We've placed our IP address here, and once we hit enter, we should see the contents of our ks.cfg file. So once you're able to see this, that basically means that now you're able, now your configuration file is now able to be retrieved from another system. So any questions so far?
No questions.
Yeah. And you may run into an issue once you're trying to web to this configuration file, and it could be that you have a firewall running. So if you have a firewall running, it's either you open up port 80 or you can turn off your firewall. You can disable your firewall, stop your firewall D. All right. So now we're going to build our new system. We're going to come over here, and it's the same thing. It's the same thing as inside of VMware Workstation. So we're going to create a new virtual machine, but we're not actually going to create it. We're just going to build the baseline of what is going to be automated. So we're going to call this lab. We're going to call this lab 4-kick. That's going to be the name. This is a Linux system, and this will be a CentOS 7. All right, so that's the disk that we're going to use. All right, and we're going to give this system 4 CPU and about 16 gigabytes of RAM. Let's give the hard disk about 40 gigs. And the data store ISO we're going to use is the CentOS 7. All right, so now we're going to hit next, and we're going to hit finish. All right, so now I'm going to power on this system. All right, so now that it's powering on, I'm not going to hit enter because this is not going to be this is not going to be a manual installation. This is going to be an automated installation. So instead of hitting enter, we're going to hit the, so instead of hitting enter, I hit enter. Let me power back off and power back on. Power off, all right, let's power back on. All right, so instead of hitting enter, we're going to hit the escape key. So hitting the escape key will now bring up this boot screen here. So you'll hit the escape key. All right, so now what we want to do from this boot screen is we want to be able to retrieve that ks.cfg file on that other system. We want to use that ks.cfg file to build this system instead of having to go through it manually by partitioning, setting our time zone, creating our users, setting the packages that we want installed, and just going through that entire process. So what we're going to do is we're going to type Linux, and then space http://192.168.1.10. This is the IP address of our other system /ks.cfg. So Linux http:// the IP address of our other system. So it's basically the document root, which is we're basically locating the ks.cfg file. So now, if we've done this correctly, once I hit enter, it is going to basically go through and automatically install and build this system using that ks.cfg file. So now let's just give it a moment, and hopefully we did everything correctly and we won't have to touch this file. Just cross our fingers. Come on. I think we might have made a mistake somewhere. Yeah, we did. Yeah, I did make a mistake somewhere. Let me X out of this and let's power this off. And let's go back to our Anaconda file. So it's the ks.cfg. And the only change we made here was to the IP address. And let's see. So that's still a moment. Just a moment. All right. So there was no issue with our configuration file here. So let's go ahead and let's save that. Let's restart HTTPD once again. All right, now let's go back over here and let's power this back on again. All right, so we're going to hit the escape key. Now we're at the boot screen. So it was Linux. What we forgot was to include the KS. So what I did was HTTP instead of KS equals HTTP://. Now the IP address 1.10/ks.cfg. All right. All right, so now let's go ahead and hit enter. So now our installation should now be automated. Okay, all right. Looks like it looks much better now. So you have to make sure you include that KS before the KS equals before the HTTP. All right. All right. So there it goes. So it did not prompt us to include the time zone. It completed the time zone information by itself. It set up all the network information by itself. We don't need to make any changes to the root password because we've already included that root password and we already have a user. That's the first user on the system. And all of those changes can be adjusted. Anything that you want on your new system can those changes can be made inside of the ks.cfg file. So you can make any change that you want there in the ks.cfg file, and that file can be a baseline of how your systems are going to be looking going forward. So it'll install all of the baseline packages that you'll need. Any users that need to be added will all be inside of that file, uh, just for deploying any new systems. So now once this install is complete, it will automatically reboot and take us to the login screen. And you have to make sure that uh, that you're able to get to this first. So if you're able to get to this first, 192.168.1.10, your IP address of your system, followed by the ks.cfg file. And remember that ks.cfg file, that's in the var www HTML directory. So within the HTML directory, the ks.cfg file, we copy the Anaconda file to the ks.cfg file, and we make the changes that we need to. You change your IP address. Um, you'll also make you also add the reboot parameter at the bottom. Any packages or so that you want, any extra packages that or so that you want, you can do a yum install followed by the package name. You can do a user add followed by any users that you need added. Um, anything of the sort. All of that can be added there. All right. Let's get back over here. So any questions so far here?
Yeah, I have one question. So I know the let's say you were going to use a Red Hat system, the information in a Red Hat system. Can you use that to configure or to kickstart a CentOS system? Is that possible?
I've never tried that. I don't think you would want to do that. I believe there are some parameters in here possibly that are related to CentOS specifically, possibly. But you might be able to, you can give it a try. You can give it a try. I haven't done that before, but I wouldn't recommend that. But just if you want to play around and do that, like you see here, you see the volume group CentOS, but that's just a volume group.
I
You can
see.
have a volume group called CentOS on a Red Hat system that
I
would,
see. I see. It's
but
just a volume group name.
yeah, just a volume group name. Um, what else? I don't really see anything that doesn't look like it would be. You can compare. You can spin up a Red Hat system and you can compare the Anaconda files and see how they differ. Or you can actually try and, well, you know what are we talking about? Let's try that. Let's give that a try because it doesn't take any effort at all. but definitely I wouldn't recommend doing that. And when you're in the work field, I'm not sure if I even have a Red Hat ISO on here. I don't think I have one. I'll have to copy one over. Um, hmm. Yeah, I don't have one. I'll have to copy one over.
I see. I'm booting mine up, but I've deleted and restarted so many that
Yeah.
I don't know if one of the red hats that I have has, I don't know if they have the repos configured yet, your Yum repository configured
Okay.
yet. Yeah, that's why I asked that question, because I think I might have one that I've never actually, this is the first time I'm actually uploading CentOS to my system, and it's literally the same thing. It's almost done actually.
Yeah,
So
it's
yeah,
actually the same exact thing. And the thing is with CentOS is free. The reason why I had you guys using the Red Hat was also to pick up the habit of configuring your local yum repository, your and the etc yum.repos.d, just to pick up the understanding of doing that.
I see. I see.
Yeah. Um, this should be done soon. Taking some time. Give me 1 second. All right, sorry about that. So yeah, so let's give this a few more minutes, and it should bring us to the okay. So it looks like it's going to reboot. All right, so it looks like it's rebooting. So once it comes back up, we'll go ahead and log in. All right, there it goes. All right, so it looks like we're in. Let's go to our home directory, see if it created our add a user, and it did. So, so yeah, so just like that, that's exactly how that would work. So, um, like I said, if there are any new users that you want created, you'll just do a user add followed by the username. The packages or so. Um, this is definitely a way, definitely a process you can use for automating the installation, and it's definitely good practices, but good practice basically.
Real quick, can I share my screen with you?
Yeah, yep, definitely. All right, all right. So it looks like you're trying to copy a file to a file.
Yeah, see, that's where I screwed up. Um, is there
So
supposed to be
what file are you trying to copy?
the Anaconda file?
All right. So just look at it carefully and try and figure out what you're doing wrong. Because it's a
Oh,
simple, yeah.
I
It says
think
no such file or directory. So it says there's no Anaconda file. So
oops, is that it? Oops.
where is the Anaconda file located?
It's in the root, right?
Yeah, the root user.
Mm-hmm.
So ROOT.
Oh, you have to write that out.
Yeah. No, slash ROOT.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's the root user slash OOT. Then
Then
another slash. Yep.
slash on the overwrite.
Yeah.
This.
So there's nothing inside of it, but it's just prompting you if you want to. But
Okay.
you can just put yeah, yeah.
All right. And there it is right there. Now this is the part I wanted to system. Oops, I moved out of there. System CTL status firewall D active and running.
Yep.
So I can just say stop. Is that how you stop, right? Or is it disable?
Yep. You can stop it, and then you can uh yeah,
All right.
yeah, stopping it is fine. If you reboot it, it'll start
It'll
back up
restart.
again.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but if you wanted to stay off permanently, you would just do a disable.
Okay, so that was the only place I had a question. Oops, that's not yours. This is mine. Yep. Slash ks.c. G. Cool, 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 cool. It's all here. Although I have
Yep.
not made the changes to it just yet.
Yep. And remember, when you make the change to it, you have to restart HTTPD again.
I see, I see. Okay, okay, cool. Cool. There was a lot of processes that I couldn't write notes for, so I figured if I do it real quick while you're troubleshooting, I'll be able to figure out what's going on, and it'll stick more in my memory. This thing is taking forever. I was also loading a CentOS one. Uh, okay, I can stop sharing now.
Okay. All right. Okay. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to pull up. So Kickstart was the next topic we're going to go over is hardening. So hardening your Linux server, and this is actually the last topic. So hardening the Linux server, and what I'm actually going to pull up here, just a moment. All right. So I'm actually going to pull up the interview questions, and at the bottom is the CIS BenchMark Guidelines. And that's exactly what you're going to follow if you are ever asked any question regards to hardening your Linux server.
Okay.
Okay, right there. So harden Linux server. All right, so
I
CIS
can't
BenchMark.
see your screen real quick.
Oh, you can't. Okay, I'm not sharing. Oh. All right, can you see that?
No, nothing yet.
Well, can't see that. Okay, is that better?
Hey, here we go.
Okay. All right. So hardening the Linux server. All right. So once your system is built, there are some baseline parameters that you need to make sure are taken care of before your system can go into production. And production is, like we spoke about before, production is basically the the final stage in where a system would be placed. That is, and that system is basically used for, like, let's say you access a website. Let's say you access a website, like Facebook. So Facebook.com is running on a production server. So, they have development servers and they have test servers, and those systems, those websites, we're not going to be able to see. It's only internal to the Facebook IT. So they do their tests on their test systems and their development systems. But once any final changes that they make, which they're certain are going to work, they place it on that production system, which is what the customer sees, who we are. Like once we go on like Facebook.com, um, or even on Instagram, or any website, Yahoo, Gmail, anything of the sort. Those are all running on production servers. So these servers, you need to make sure that there are baseline checks that are done to make sure that they pass these baseline checks before you can send that server to to a production environment. And there are security scans that can be done on these systems even after you've made all of your changes, just to make sure that that the system is aligned with all of the necessary requirements. So one of the examples is not permitting root login into SSH, as in not being able to log into a system directly as root. So that's not a good practice. So within the SSHD underscore config file, there's an option. Let me actually show you here. There's an option here. So vi etc ssh dconfig. If you see here, right here, permits root login. So you see how that's hashed out? So that basically means you cannot get to the system directly as root. And that's not good practice. So you want to SSH into the system as your user first. So you want to get into the system first as BADDI, and then once you're BADDI, you now want to sudo su minus to root. So that's one of the CIS benchmark guidelines there, not permitting root login. Another example is closing ports that are not being used. Once you install, or once you configure get a system built, you will notice there are sometimes ports listening, or even if a system is already built, you will notice that there are ports that are listening or that are running, that are open on your system. You want to make sure that any ports that are not being used are closed. So let me give you another example. So to check to see what ports are listening, I don't know if you remember. Do you remember how to check to see if there's a port listening or that's open?
No, I do not remember.
Netstat.
Netstat, God.
Yeah, netstat -NLTP. And the only thing you need to worry about is that T. T for TCP. All right, so netstat has -NLTP. So it doesn't look like there are many ports that are listening. So port 80 is currently listening now because we have HTTPD running. That's for that kickstart. SSHD is usually open. And these are, these up here, yeah. So this and port 80 here as well. All right, and we have other miscellaneous ports like this master and or so. I'm not sure where that's related to, but you would sometimes this list will be much longer, and uh, some of these vulnerability scans that are done on your system, which will basically give you back a report, and this report will consist of the ports that are open on your system, which you will then be able to determine which ones need to be closed or which ones are not supposed to be open, so that you can close them, or so that you can kill whatever process. So you see HTTPD is running on this process. So I'm not sure. Yeah, we did actually go over killing a process, but to kill a process is kill-9 followed by the process. So that process is 7755 for HTTPD. So if I would do a 7755, so actually let's go over here and let's refresh that. Looks like I'm still able to get to it. But if I kill that process, now let's go back and now let's try and get back to this again. Or let's see, CFG. It still wants to keep running. Let me see. Okay, well, it looks like it then took a different port. Switch from 7755 to, but if you just stop HTTPD, if you stop that service, it will close that port. So yeah, so any ports that are not being used, you need to make sure that they're closed. So another example is building servers in a single application service. So I remember what I said before. There are so many different applications that you will install that you will install on your system. Best practices: if you have a DNS server, you want to dedicate that system only to DNS. You don't want to have a DNS server and have and you also use it as a kickstart server, or also use it as an NFS server. You want to dedicate that DNS server only to DNS. If you have too many applications running on one system, what you're doing is you're opening up loopholes and backdoors to hackers to be able to get into your system. So that's why it's best to only have just one, because the more packages you have open on your system, the more ports you have open, the more items that are listening, the more resources that you'll need to have open. So it's best just to have one, or not. You don't want to have too many applications running on one system. So that's basically just to avoid any loopholes or backdoors, many hackers trying to be able to get into your system. All right, so GUI X11. All right, GUI X11, if you do some research on GUI X11, it's basically from this screen here, right? From this screen here, if I configure GUI X11, let's say there are some services or some packages that require a GUI interface, so an actual interactive interface. So you won't be able to configure these packages without, you can't do it on the command line. It'll have to be done interactively. Like a GUI will need to come up. So if a GUI is configured, that's also can be a security issue. At times you would need to, but you want to try avoid, if you can avoid having to install a package that requires a GUI X11 interface, just try and avoid it and see if there are other ways around and configuring anything that you need. Just try avoid using GUI X11. So it's basically, like I said, some packages, some resources require an interactive screen that will actually pop up once you execute that package. that will allow you to interactively configure the remaining parts of your install. All right, so creating separate partitions when creating your machine. So let me give you an example. All right, so if I do a df minus h, it looks like everything on my system is running under root, and that is not what you want. So any user that's created that's all going to be in the home directory, but my home directory is now pulling resources from my root directory. Anything in var, anything, anything. So everything is running under root. So what you want to do is you want to create separate partitions for any major directories that you know that are going to grow frequently. So /var. So if I do a cd slash, I do an ll. So like /var, or even your home directory, or even sometimes your Etsy, even sometimes your Etsy directory. You want those on separate partitions. Separate partitions, as in you want to create a logical volume, and you want to mount it separately. You want to mount it separately from root. And having those all under root can also cause security issues as well. So mounting those on separate partitions is definitely, those are all best practices. Because if you're, let's say you have in about a month, or even about 2-3 months, you notice a skyrocket of users that have been hired in your company. Like, let's say for some reason your company decided to hire about 2,000 users, and those 2,000 users that you are hiring, the home directory is going to grow. It's going to grow rapidly. So you don't want that root directory to fill up. If your root directory fills up, then your system could crash, or you'll have issues accessing your system, or it will just start causing issues. So you want to mount your home directory on a separate partition. So if you need to add more space to your home directory, just add more space. Or even if it's var, or let's say you notice that you're installing more packages on your system than usual, you want to mount var on a separate partition. All right. So this is an interview question. So they were not going to ask you directly, like, what are CIS benchmark guidelines? That's not how they're going to ask you. They're not going to ask you, what are CIS benchmark guidelines? They're going to ask you, are there any, or they could ask you, do you do any vulnerability scans on your system? Do you do any security scans on your systems, or so? You tell them, what you're going to tell them is that we follow CIS benchmark guidelines. And for them to hear that is definite plus, because CIS benchmark guidelines are guidelines that are also used in the government on their Linux systems or on their Windows systems. So the guidelines can be so much more in depth, but there are just some parts of the guidelines that some companies will choose to use. So being able to discuss some of these items that I discussed here under CIS benchmark guidelines, which is also related to hardening your system, is what you're basically going to talk about. They're not going to ask you what they are. You are going to tell them, once you hear the question of anything related to security, like, okay, do you have a security team? Or do you do anything related to security? Or how do you secure your system? That's when you're going to bring up the topic of CIS benchmark guidelines. And once you bring up those once you bring up the topic of CIS benchmark guidelines, then you can go into detail about, okay, tell them, yeah, we follow CIS benchmark guidelines. These guidelines consist of, closing ports that are not supposed to be open, limiting the amount of applications or packages that are installed on one system, to avoid loopholes and backdoors from hackers being able to access our system, and also creating separate partitions for some directories such as home or var. Home is always growing with different users that are being added to our system. So we want those directories mounted on separate partitions, and also avoiding, also permitting root login into SSH. So that's exactly how you would approach that. So any questions there?
No questions.
All right. Okay, so that is basically it with Kickstart and hardening your Linux server.